Imagine a world where the heroes of the American Revolution were still amongst us. Well, for a brief moment in the mid-1800s, they were. We've uncovered something extraordinary from the archives. 6 extraordinary photos of the last surviving veterans who fought for our nation's freedom. These aren't just pictures. They are a direct link to the founding of America. You are about to meet the last of a generation. Hear their story and discover why their portraits are so much more than just photos. You won't want to miss this. By the 1850s, the American Revolution was a distant memory. George Washington was a legend, and the brave men who fought alongside him were a dying breed. But it was also a time of new technology, specifically photography. For the first time, a camera could capture a real-life image of a person. In the 1860s, tintypes, ambrotypes, and albumen were the most popular types of photographs. Daguerreotypes, while still around, were declining in popularity. I love this image. I have to stop to show you this image. I absolutely love it. This is an example of an ambrotype, which was simply captioned in French, "Anonymous, a veteran and his wife." According to findagrave.com, this is Henry Maidment, a Napoleonic War veteran. Henry was an agricultural laborer who lived in England. In 1866, Henry was one of the few surviving British Army veterans who had fought Napoleon Bonaparte's French army in the Peninsular War. At 83, he could not work and had hit hard times. He survived on a very small amount of money given to him by his local parish and a single loaf of bread each week. He had a distinguished military record, but had left the army without a military pension. Notice the medal on his lapel. This is said to be the Military General Service Medal with clasp. Each of his major battles were represented by a clasp on the ribbon. Such a medal was valued around $8,000 US. In August 1815, his battalion had even accompanied Napoleon Bonaparte into exile on the island of St. Helena. Talk about a man who saw some amazing events. Hats off, Henry Maidment. This picture would have been taken before 1858 because his wife Rose died in 1857. Let's get back to the pictures of our American Revolution heroes. As the number of veterans dwindled, they became national heroes. They were invited to parades, and people would cheer them as living symbols of freedom. In a way, they were the rock stars of their time. In 1864, a photographer named Philip Haas had a genius idea. He decided to capture the faces of these living legends before they were gone forever. This led to a series of incredible portraits that offer a window to the past. These aren't just photos, they are a national treasure. Just think about the sheer amount of history these men witnessed in their lifetime. When they were born, America was a collection of British colonies. They saw the country fight for its freedom and Then they lived to see it grow into a modern nation. They saw the end of the monarchy and the beginning of a new republic with the signing of the Constitution. They would have seen the invention of the steam engine and the first trains and factories. They saw presidents come and go, from George Washington to Abraham Lincoln. They lived through the War of 1812 and, in their final years, witnessed the horrors of the American Civil War, a conflict that pitted the very states that they had fought to unite against each other. Their lives were a living timeline, a bridge between two worlds. These images appeared in the 1864 book, The Last Men of the Revolution. There is a chapter dedicated to each veteran. To create the book, the 6 photographs were included, and they were interviewed by Reverend E.B. Hillard. These images and book have captivated generations since then. But through a combination of faded memories and the interviewer's patriotic agenda, the biographies within the book were distorted, containing information that ranged from inaccurate or implausible. So let's talk about each veteran and their place in this book. Meet the first of these heroes, Daniel Waldo. He was born in 1762, and records show he was around 16 years old when he enlisted. His rank was a private in the Connecticut militia. It is said he fought in the Battle of Horseneck in Connecticut on February 26, 1779, and became a POW for a short time. The battle was a small American force that attempted to defend their position at a meeting house, but were outnumbered. Accounts of that day report between 20 and 40 American prisoners were taken by the British forces. Later, Daniel attended Yale College and became a clergyman, and in 1856, at the age of 94, Waldo was named Chaplain of the United States House of Representatives. Allegedly, he is the only person to have voted for both George Washington and Abraham Lincoln in presidential elections. Waldo lived a long life, passing away at the amazing age of 101. He lived at this house in Syracuse, New York, before dying. He is now buried in the Rose Hill Cemetery in Syracuse, New York. Let's hear an excerpt from the book about Daniel.
His connection with the War of the Revolution begun in 1778. In that year, being then 16 years old, he was drafted as a soldier for a month's service at New London. He subsequently enlisted for 8 months in the service of the state, and during the term of this enlistment, in March, 1779, was taken prisoner by the Tories at Horseneck. This will be recollected as the spot rendered famous by Putnam's escape, on horseback, down the stone steps from the height on which the Continental troops were posted. The circumstances of Mr. Waldo's capture, as given by himself to the artist who took his photograph, were as follows. One of the guards, on leaving his beat one stormy night, failed to give him warning, and thus the Tories surprised him. One of them snapped a musket at him, but it only flashed in the pan, whereupon he laid down his own musket and made signs of surrender. But one of the enemy, on pretense that he was about to pick it up again, made a thrust at him with his bayonet, which failed to pierce him. He thereupon demanded to be treated as a prisoner of war, and lying down, the attacking party passed over him into the house which he was guarding, capturing the whole company, 37 in number, which it contained. With his fellow prisoners Mr. Waldo was carried to New York, where he was confined in the far-famed Sugar House for about 2 months. There, with the exception of short rations, he was well treated. This terminated his immediate connection with the war. Upon his release by exchange, he returned to his home, in Windham, and resumed his labors on the farm. It goes on to say, after preaching in several places, for a short time in each, he was ordained on the 24th of May, 1792, as pastor of the church at West Suffield, where he remained 18 years. Here he was married to Mary Hanchett, by whom he had 5 children. In 1805, Mrs. Waldo became insane, and died 7 years ago, after having been in this state uninterruptedly for upwards of 50 years. I lived, said the old man, in speaking of it, 50 years with a crazy wife.
Next we have Alexander Millener, born in 1760 in Quebec, Canada. He first joined the Revolutionary fight at the young age of 15. He initially served as a drummer boy in Washington's Life Guard and later participated in various battles. Washington's Life Guard, officially known as the Commander-in-Chief's Guard, was a special unit of the Continental Army formed to protect General George Washington, his headquarters, and his papers during the Revolutionary War. They were considered the most elite unit in the Army. In Washington's Life Guard, drummer boys primarily served as messengers to signal commands using their drums. They relayed orders during the wake-up call, work details, meals, and retreats, and also communicated commands on the battlefield. While they weren't typically armed, they were often in the thick of battle, their drums playing a vital role in coordinating troop movements. Drummer boys were also sometimes given other duties, such as helping the wounded. According to Millener's family tree on Ancestry.com, his mother, Jane Westcott, was a washerwoman in George Washington's army. That same family tree indicates he and his wife, Abigail Barton Millener, had 10 children. They even named one of his sons George Washington Millener. His house once stood a block from the Old Erie Canal in Adams Basin, New York. He passed away in 1865 at the age of 104. He is buried in the Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester, New York. One thing I noticed is the pictures in the archives are a bit different than what ended up in the book. For instance, Alexander's hands are in different positions. This is true for all the veterans' pictures. Let's hear an excerpt from the book about Alexander.
Too young at the time of his enlistment for service in the ranks, he was enlisted as drummer boy, and in this capacity he served 4 years in Washington's Life Guard. He was a great favorite, he says, with the commander-in-chief, who used frequently, after the beating of the reveille, to come along and pat him on the head and call him his boy. On one occasion, a bitter cold morning, he gave him a drink out of his flask. His recollection of Washington is distinct and vivid. I was a good man, a beautiful man. He was always pleasant, never changed countenance, but wore the same in defeat and retreat as in victory. Lady Washington, too, he recollects, on her visits to the camp. She was a short, thick woman, very pleasant and kind. She used to visit the hospitals, was kind-hearted, and had a motherly care. One day the general had been out some time. When he came in, his wife asked him where he had been. He answered, laughing, "To look at my boys." "Well," said she, "I will go and see my children." When she returned, the general inquired, "What do you think of them?" "I think," answered she, "that there are a good many. They took a great notion to me. One day, the general sent for me to come up to headquarters. Tell him, he sent word, that he needn't fetch his drum with him. I was glad of that. The lifeguard came out and paraded, and the roll was called. There was one Englishman, Bill Dorchester. The general said to him, "Come, Bill, play up this air Yorkshire tune." When he got through, the general told me to play. So I took the drum, overhauled her, braced her up, and played a tune. The general put his hand in his pocket and gave me $3. Then one and another gave me more, so I made out well. In all, I got $15. I was glad of it. My mother wanted some tea, and I got the poor old woman some. His mother accompanied the army as washerwoman, for the sake of being near her boy. He relates the following anecdote of General Washington. We were going along one day, slow march, and came to where the boys were jerking stones. "Halt!" came the command. "Now, boys," said the general, "I will show you how to jerk a stone." He beat them all. He smiled, but didn't laugh out. Mr. Millener was at the battles of White Plains, Brandywine, Saratoga, Monmouth, Yorktown, and some others. The first of these he describes as a nasty battle. At Monmouth, he received a flesh wound in his thigh. One of the officers came along and, looking at me, said, "What's the matter with you, boy?" "Nothing," I answered. "Poor fellow," exclaimed he, "you are bleeding to death." I looked down. The blood was gushing out of me. The day was very warm. Lee did well, but Washington wasn't very well pleased with him. General Lee he describes as a large man. He had a most enormous nose. One day a man met him and turned his nose away. "What do you do that for, you D.D. rascal?" exclaimed he. "I was afraid our noses would meet," was his reply. He had a very large nose himself. Lee laughed and gave him $1.
Our next veteran is William Hutchings. William was born October 6, 1764, in York, Maine. He died May 2, 1866, at the age of 101. According to Ancestry.com, he was married to Mercy Mary Wardwell, and they had 15 children. William fought in the Siege of Castine, also referred to as the Penobscot Expedition. The little-known event took place from July 25th to August 15th in 1779. That year, the British were attracted to the peninsula in the area. Since Maine was a province of Massachusetts at the time, the occupation of the area and its potential as a British naval base was a great concern to the Massachusetts General Assembly in Boston. An American fleet of 19 armed vessels and 24 transports with more than 1,000 ill-prepared militia were assembled and sent to retake the area. Amongst the commanders was Lieutenant Colonel Paul Revere, who was in command of the ordnance train. William saw minimal action during his short time in the war. He only fought in the siege of Castine. Little side note, Maine was once part of Massachusetts. In 1652, southwest Maine became part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Later, in 1691, the province of Massachusetts Bay was chartered, incorporating Maine, Plymouth, and other territories. Finally, in 1820, Maine officially separated from Massachusetts and became the 23rd state admitted to the United States. He is buried in a small cemetery on the farm where he lived and died, the very area he fought to defend. Let's listen to an excerpt from the book about William.
Mr. Hutchings' connection with the War of the Revolution was but limited. He enlisted at the age of 15 for the coast defense of his own state, and this was the only service in which he was engaged during the war. The only fighting which he saw was at the siege of Castine, where he was taken prisoner, but the British, declaring it a shame to hold as prisoner one so young, promptly released him. His pension, until the late addition to it, was only $21.66. 1. The father of Mr. Hutchings had in his early manhood been familiar with military service, having served in the French War and been engaged in the siege and capture of Louisbourg. In his old age, he used to say that he had served under George II, George III, and also under George Washington, and was ready to serve under Madison. He lived to see his descendants of the fifth generation, by some of whom he was followed to the grave. At the time of his death, there were living, of those who derived their life through him, 10 children, 88 grandchildren, 235 great-grandchildren, and 17 great-great-grandchildren. In all, 350. At the time of the capture of Louisbourg, he was a youth of only 16 years of age, having been born in 1742. In 1768, he removed with his family from York to Penobscot, William, the subject of our sketch, being then 4 years old. The region at that time was mainly a wilderness, Mr. Hutchings, Sr., being one of the earliest settler in it. Here he remained for 10 or 12 years, clearing a farm and establishing a home under the usual conditions of hardship and suffering incident to pioneer life. His son still recalls those experiences of childhood in his father's house. At times, he says, they were scarcely able to obtain food enough to satisfy the cravings of hunger, and he has dug clams for their meal, when he was obliged to stop and rest while at his work from faintness through want of food. They were finally, however, beginning to live comfortably when the British took possession of the neighboring town of Castine and drove his father from his home, who fled with his family to Newcastle, where he abode till the close of the war, while William remained to fight the foe.
While researching William Hutchins, I discovered he is related to my very own family, not only in lineage, but in pioneering and living for generations in the very same town. Our next veteran is our oldest. Mr. Cook was born in 1759 in Plymouth, Connecticut. In 1775, at the age of 16, he enlisted in the Continental Army and served as a private in the 2nd Continental Light Dragoons Connecticut Regiment. He fought at Brandywine and Yorktown against Cornwallis and was present at his surrender in 1781. He was also wounded several times. On June 12, 1784, he received an honorable discharge signed by George Washington. According to his headstone, Mr. Cook died in 1866 in Clarendon, New York, making him 106 at his death. He is buried in Root Cemetery in Clarendon. Let's see what the book has to say about Mr. Cook.
The first time I was ordered on sentry was at Dobbs Ferry. A man came out of a barn and leveled his piece and fired. I felt the wind of the ball. A soldier near me said, "Lem, they mean you. Go on the other side of the road." So I went over, and pretty soon another man came out of the barn and aimed and fired. He didn't come near me. Soon another came out and fired. His ball lodged in my hat. By this time the firing had roused the camp, and a company of our troops came on one side, and a party of the French on the other, and they took the men in the barn prisoners and brought them in. They were cowboys. This was the first time I saw the French in operation. They stepped as though on edge. They were a dreadful proud nation. When they brought the men in, one of them had the impudence to ask, "Is the man here we fired at just now?" "Yes," said Major Talmadge, "there he is, that boy." Then he told how they had each laid out a crown, and agreed that the one who brought me down should have the 3. When he got through with his story, I stepped to my holster and took out my pistol and walked up to him and said, "If I've been a mark to you for money, I'll take my turn now. So, deliver your money, or your life." He handed over 4 crowns, and I got 3 more from the other 2.
Our next veteran is Adam Link. Adam was born in 1761 in Cumberland County, Pennsylvania. Adam married Elizabeth and had 5 children. During the war, Adam was a private in the Pennsylvania militia. He was just a teenager when he fought, joining at the age of 16. He passed away in 1864 at the age of 102 in Sulphur Springs, Ohio. He is buried in Union Cemetery in Sulphur Springs. Let's listen in to what the book has to say about Adam.
The circumstances of Mr. Link's life were humble and his part in the war unimportant. He enlisted at the age of 16 in Wheeling, Virginia, for the frontier service and spent 5 years in that service, mostly in the vicinity of Wheeling. During this time, his father, Jacob Link, was murdered by the Indians in his own house. Mr. Link was in no important battle of the war. The only interesting circumstance of his soldier life was his companionship with Poe, the famous Indian hunter, the incident of whose meeting with the Indian chief upon the shore of the lake whither both had withdrawn from the fight to wash out their guns, become foul through use. Poe completing first the cleansing of his, and so gaining the first shot, which brought down the Indian and saved his own life, is familiar.
Our last veteran is Samuel Downing. Samuel was born in 1761 in Newbury Point, Massachusetts, although I found conflicting dates on the year he was born. He is said to be the last Revolutionary War pensioner in the United States. As a young boy, he became an apprentice of Robert Atkins in the profession of spinning wheel maker. In 1780, Samuel ran away to Hopkinton, New Hampshire, to enlist in the Continental Army, but he was refused. So he went to Charlestown, New Hampshire, where he joined the 2nd New Hampshire Regiment. In 1794, he moved to Edinburgh, New York, where he settled permanently. He married Eunice, and they had 5 children. He outlived his wife and 3 of his children. Samuel died in 1867 at the age of 105 in Edinburgh, New York. He is now buried in the Clarksville Cemetery in the very town he died in. At his death in 1867, he was the oldest recorded pensioner of the Revolution, although 2 others were enrolled later. The 2 others, Daniel Frederick Bakeman and John Gray, were granted pensions in 1867, but sources say they were not considered veterans or had insufficient service to qualify. Let's hear an excerpt from the book about Samuel.
Afterwards, we were stationed in the Mohawk Valley. Arnold was our fighting general, and a bloody fellow he was. He didn't care for nothing. He'd ride right in. It was come on, boys. 'Twasn't go, boys. He was as brave a man as ever lived. He was dark-skinned, with black hair of middling height. There wasn't any waste timber in him. He was a stern-looking man, but kind to his soldiers. They didn't treat him right. He ought to have had Burgoyne's sword. But he ought to have been true. We had true men then. 'Twasn't as it is now. Everybody was true. The Tories we'd killed or driven to Canada. You don't believe, then, in letting men stay at their homes and help the enemy? Not by a grand sight, was his emphatic reply. The men that caught Andre were true. He wanted to get away, offered them everything. Washington hated to hang him. He cried, they said. The student of American history will remember the important part which Arnold performed in the battle connected with the surrender of Burgoyne. Mr. Downing was engaged. We heard, he said, Burgoyne was coming. The Tories began to feel triumphant. One of them came in one morning and said to his wife, Ticonderoga is taken, my dear. But they soon changed their tune. The first day at Bemis Heights both claimed the victory. But by and by we got Burgoyne where we wanted him, and he gave up. He saw there was no use in fighting it out. There's where I call, and gentle bless your body. We had gentlemen to fight with in those days. When they was whipped, they gave up. It isn't so now. Men,
These photos are an incredible gift from the past. They remind us that the men who fought for our nation were not just figures in a history book, but real people with real lives. What surprised you the most about these men? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. We invite you to watch all our videos from famous funerals to diving into the archives to find generations of history.